thank you so much, Jennifer. It was great. Now let me introduce our next speaker, if I can get the machine to work here. And that's Joanna Walczak. We're very proud to have Joanna as one of our graduates, so it's great to have her here today, and she's graduated and done wonderful things. She's now the Southeast Regional Administrator of the state of Florida, Department of Environmental Protection. She oversees multiple programs in Florida. It's a whole list of things here. DEP Office of Resilience, Biscayne Bay, Coupon Bight, Florida's Coral Conservation Program, Lignum Vitae. I don't see how she has time to do anything and even come to this meeting, but we appreciate all her hard work. She's co-manager of the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary, so many people don't quite understand that that's a joint organization with NOAA, so Florida is a very important part. So thank you, Joanna, for being here, and take it away.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's always awesome to be back here at my alma mater, although if you all remember the houseboat picture in Dick's opening slides, that was my original office, not this pretty building. So, so today I'm here on behalf of quite a few different partners, but I'm here to talk about what we're doing here in the state of Florida to rebuild and restore the resilience of the Florida Reef Tract, especially in light of the coral disease outbreak that was mentioned throughout the day. So just for anybody who actually doesn't know where we are, just a reminder, we have a big reef offshore here, not quite as big as Australia, Terry, so I'm not getting competitive. But we do have also 6 million people living in direct proximity to this area. When you're standing in the beach in Fort Lauderdale, you can literally, as you know, swim to the reef from shore. And that means that we have a tremendous dense population using these resources in a very small area. And so we need a lot of management because of that. You've heard us talk about the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary. That's one of our oldest management areas. We have Biscayne National Park, but we also have the newly established Southeast Florida Coral Reef Ecosystem Conservation Area that was just recently designated for this northern part of the Florida Reef Tract that has historically not received a lot of attention. Everybody talks about the ecology. We all know coral reefs are amazing. These are all photos from Florida's coral reefs. But somebody mentioned earlier we don't often talk about the economics, and that's how to get some decisions being made. So we've focused a lot on those ecosystem services that ecology provides. So we know that a healthy reef reduces flooding and actually increases shoreline protection. It's literally the first line of defense for our coasts. We know it provides incredibly valuable habitat for our commercial and recreational fishing industries and makes us a world-class fishing destination. Curtis Gregg, we happen to know that we get out there fishing and enjoying these resources. Tourism is a big driver. And I think somebody mentioned, I think the Admiral mentioned biomedical exploration. We literally have a backyard medicine cabinet. And we're starting to put numbers on that. So tourism alone, we know, is over a $6 billion annual industry here in South Florida. But this is a big new report that just came out, and if you don't know about this, I think you should. It says that Florida's reefs, especially these mainland reefs here, provide over $330 million annually in shoreline protection benefits, and that goes over $1 billion during a severe storm event. That's a significant contribution to our economy that cannot be overlooked. We all know, though, that coral reefs have these global and local stressors. And I wanted to point it out that Florida's reefs, it's not just the hot stressors, it's the cold as well. We actually had a really cold snap in 2010 that killed almost as many corals as we have had lost due to the heat stress. We know that ocean acidification is a big deal, but do you know that coastal acidification created by land-based sources of pollution is actually, we're already blowing 100-year models in Port Everglades right here next to us. This is happening right now. We're literally losing our reefs. They're not accreting anymore, and they're actively degrading. And then on top of that, you've got the 6 million people, and everything that we do here, we're loving our reefs to death. From the golf courses and our private yards and the way we fertilize, to the things that we're eating, to the need to have ports that are an economic driver, to boating, not knowing where the reefs are and accidentally throwing your anchor on it. We have a kind of a death by 6 million cuts scenario happening here. And so just like any habitat and ecosystem over time, that chronic stress ultimately leaves you vulnerable. And what we started seeing in 2013, 2014 was this outbreak of coral disease It's now called stony coral tissue loss disease, for lack of a better term, mainly because it's literally eating the tissue of the coral. What we do know, and I'm going to go over this pretty quickly, but there's a ton of research behind all of this. It is a highly infectious waterborne disease. And it also has a very long residence time. Most disease outbreaks subside in a matter of months to maybe a year. This one has been going strong for 5 years and is continuing to go. It also, and this is the very important part, we've seen large-scale outbreaks before of disease. Most of you have heard about the acroporids being lost in the Caribbean. That was 2 species. This affects over 22 species of our only roughly 45 reef builders. So more than half of our reef building species are impacted by this outbreak. It also has incredibly high prevalence within those susceptible species, and so we're seeing in some cases 66 to 95 plus of the colonies in those susceptible species being impacted. And this is where it really is tough. Most disease that we've known before leaves a little bit of tissue left. It subsides and allows that colony to be reduced but not fully dead. Unfortunately, this one doesn't. This one, in most cases, is 100% mortality, and it affects both the smallest and the largest, oldest colonies we know. There was a colony right off of Broward County here that was over 330 years old that died within a matter of months. I think the Admiral showed some map in the beginning of the process that it took. From 2014, it started near Key Biscayne here area, and rapidly spread north and south. And as of, I think, last week, it's officially in the Marquesas. So at this point, I would say 90 to 95% of the entire Florida Reef Tract has observations of this disease. It's unfortunately continued also to spread beyond Florida and is now known throughout the Atlantic Caribbean and is confirmed in Karen. How many sites are Karen, Val, Melanie? Are we in like 5? Sorry, Dana. 7 other locations. Thank you. I'm like, there are so many partners here. And so what did we do? We brought our partners together. And because this is globally unprecedented in terms of the scale and severity of this outbreak, we have put together an unprecedented response to it. And so everything I'm saying is on behalf of all of these incredible partners. And I want to especially big shout out to Nova Southeastern University, who is one of our tremendous active partners. We put together an ad hoc response effort. We've got the 4 agencies you see at the top there kind of leading this group, but we've actively involved everybody that we possibly can who wants to come to this table to help with this response. And I actually also want to give a shout out to our Martin County Commissioner, Doug Smith, who's sitting up in the corner, who's one of our elected official champions. So we're not talking, yeah, seriously, this This isn't just about scientists. This isn't just about managers. This is getting our elected officials knowledgeable about it. This is getting anyone who wants to be at this table invested in this. We put together some structure because everybody needs a little structure. Thanks to NOAA, we have support for a dedicated fellow response coordinator and coral fellow. We bring those folks together in technical workshops every year to make sure that we are aligned in the ideas that we think are the highest priorities to move us forward. And we're openly sharing information, and this is really important, folks. We are actively breaking down silos. We are not waiting to publish. We are actively sharing information as it comes out. We're collaborating across disciplines on all of these crazy, never been done projects before, and it is really tremendous because that itself is the only thing that's going to make us successful. So we also talk about the short term and the long term of what we're doing. The short term are we need capacity, we need bodies, and we need a priority work to lead us forward in this endeavor. But you've heard it said before, we can't do all of this work in the water unless we're addressing those larger issues, the global issues and the local stressors. So I'm going to talk really quickly about some of the short-term things we're doing specific to the disease response, and that is just what is this pathogen? Just continuing to figure out what the pathogen is and characterize it. And we're looking at bacterial and viral. We know that it reacts to antibiotics, so it's helping us narrow it down, but then there's always something confounding. And the one thing about this disease is that it always changes based on what you think you know. But we're also looking at environmental factors. What allowed this to happen? We know that it was a degraded system, but around 2014, what were the outliers that may have led to a triggering? Was this a perfect storm? Thank you for the heads up. And so one of the things that's anecdotal that I think is very important to highlight here is that when researchers are bringing corals that are diseased into the lab and into clean, clear water, sometimes they have the ability to heal. And so is there a potential that if we had the ability to clean up our water, would our corals have a fighting chance to fend off this disease? We're focusing a lot on action. The state, we have a lot of things going on out there, but we have to figure out what we can do about it. And so we've got our teams working on intervention actions. We've moved from actual treating of the lesions themselves, and we're actually moving forward into whole colony treatments, moving those from laboratory trials to small-scale field trials as fast as we possibly can. We're actively going out and rescuing wild population corals from before the disease even gets there to make sure that we have the ability to save their genetic stock for future restoration efforts. But we don't even know we don't have that capacity to house those yet, so we're continuing to work on those. We're also now turning our attention to the survivors. There are tons of survivors out there, and they're now possibly the most important corals in the world because they've been living next to tons of stress and they've survived the disease. So we want to make sure we're actually capturing them as well. We know that restoration is in the future of Florida, but we need the capacity to get there. So we are working on building up that capacity, both technical and actual buildings and infrastructure. We're also trying to figure out where, when, and what is appropriate to restore. If we put out corals that are novel to this disease, are we just throwing our money away by putting that coral out there to die again? So we're doing really quick fail-fast tests to figure out what should be planted where and when. In the long term, we are addressing water quality. Hopefully many of you have heard about the governor's bold new vision for the environment. We have a very supportive state government right now who's very focused on addressing water quality. So NOVA, actually here, is leading our coral reef water quality monitoring project here in the northern reefs. We're also actively looking at the regulations that we have within our agency. Right now we've got a turbidity review, but every 3 years we do a review of water quality, and we can incorporate nutrients as well as anything else that would be better protective of corals. We're also working at the local level to develop tools for local entities like municipalities, counties, where we actually provide information of how they should be building projects locally to help reduce things getting into the water. And then ultimately, we do want to look forward into that ecosystem restoration. We want a full plan of what the future of restoring the Florida Reef Tract will look like. Jen mentioned the U.S. Coral Reef Task Force. I'm that conduit of information from the national level to the state level and making sure that we're consistent across the U.S. And one of their main priorities right now is the propagation of stress-hardened corals. I mentioned these are possibly the most important corals in the world right now because they're already living in the conditions that most places haven't seen yet or aren't going to see for a while. And so if we can combine our stress-hardened corals, the ones that are living in our port areas, and combine them with the disease survivors, we can continue to help those corals exist into the future. We're also looking to revolutionize the technology and innovation. We have an opportunity here. We are probably the most well-funded coral jurisdiction. With all of the amazing resources that we have here, we have an opportunity to really make this a big, new, bold place for restoration in Florida. And that only happens through those, as the Admiral said, the private-public partnerships. And so I'm excited to announce that we're partnering with Forest Blue and the NFL because Super Bowl is here in February. And we are doing 100 Yards of Hope, which is a football field scale restoration project to raise the NFL awareness and therefore the national platform awareness of the crisis that is happening, the urgency of what needs to be done, and ultimately raising awareness for all Americans about how critical this is to Florida and our nation. And last but not least, we're engaging our stakeholders. This is probably the most important thing that we do because we often joke in natural resource management that it's not about managing corals, it's about managing the people and the behaviors that you ultimately want to see changed. And part of that is informing them of what's going on out there and making science and these really complex things understandable for them, and then asking them how they want to see it managed. it's it's not that novel of a concept, but that's the only way that we're going to get change. It's the only way that we're going to demand change as a society. And so we have a process up here that happened for the Northern Reefs, our Florida Reefs community planning process. We have an ongoing stakeholder group called the Southeast Florida Coral Reef Initiative. And down in the sanctuary right now, this is happening live if anybody wants to be part of history. This is the first time through the restoration blueprint of the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary that we're completely reviewing all of the regulations, management zones, et cetera, that were established back in 1990. This is the first time it's a comprehensive review of those things. So if you want to support Coral World, please have your voice heard. Ultimately, these communities, these reefs, are so integral to our lives and our economy that I truly believe that our reefs are worth saving. So thank you so much for your time today.